Hi, and welcome to Your Inside Power. I am your show host, Patricia Stepler, here on the Win-Win Women TV shows. So today I have a very special guest for you. Her name is Carole Hodges. Carole, it's nice to have you today.
Oh, it's great to be here.
So just to give you a little background about Carole and why I thought she'd be a great guest for us, is she is a best-selling author of the book, The Menopause Millionaire, The Keys to Prosperity and Meaning in the Second Half of Your Life. And she's the creator of Life Change Navigation, supporting leaders ready to sail out of their comfort zone to create magnificent life adventures. This fits so perfectly with our thought of your inside power and how we have everything we need right inside of us. So Carole, how did you become or decide to write this book about being a menopause millionaire?
Well, a couple of things happened. First, my whole life fell apart right at that age of menopause where bodies are changing, but my marriage changed, my career changed, everything changed at that point. And as I looked back and got a little perspective, I began to understand the enormity of change that happens to us as women. And men are sometimes jealous that I wrote my book for women because it can happen to men too. But for women, we have our bodies changing and telling us that something is different at the same time that the rest of the world can be. So I realized how important it was to be able to look at that and look with perspective. At midlife, you're not a newbie. You know something about life and yourself, and you've had a career and maybe been married, had children. You have a world of experience around you, and yet so many things are changing. So it is a great time to look into that inner you and say, what am I really all about? So what do I want to do with the rest of my life adventure?
You know, Carole, I felt that way when, my last child, I had 3 kids, and my last child, my son, went off to college. And I remember just months after we had taken him down to college, driving in, from my mom's house down. So I was kind of taking care of my mom. And I had my 3 kids that were, pretty much grown. But I'm driving through this, mountain area and listening to this CD on purpose. And I got really angry because I was like, what is my purpose now? Because up to that point, my purpose was raising my kids. And, right in that menopause time period, and I was like, I have the rest of my life. What do I want to do with it so I feel more fulfilled? Is that something you see in women?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And I think the most important thing is to recognize that that's part of what it's about. Because in my case, everything happened all at once, that my marriage was falling apart. But I began to realize I had changed, that both of us had changed. I got married in my early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, by the time I'm approaching 50, a lot has changed. I knew myself a whole lot more. I mean, I thought we both knew everything when we were in our early 20s. And it took time to recognize I had a lot to learn. But our values changed. And it really is a time to begin to look at that, at how you're changing. And you were, I think, lucky to recognize that it's what's behind it is looking at your life purpose. If you don't recognize that, you could go into just feeling sorry for yourself. Heck, my kids are leaving, and I don't like my world. But if you look inward, that's where you begin to see it really is about your life purpose, because we live longer these days.
Right. And, you know,
And at
I
50,
feel
you
like
might have another 50 years.
exactly. And so I know I've seen other women, and when they become that empty nest, they feel lost. And, you know, it's like, because they've lived their whole life for their kids, which I did too. And, you know, I was quite comfortable being Rachel's mom or Renee's mom or Danny's mom. If I didn't have a name, it was okay. But now all of a sudden it's like, this is my time. And I felt like, you know, all those years, because it was about 30 years raising my kids, that I was like on the back burner, and now I could come forward. So how do you help people to do that, make that transition when maybe they are having a difficult time?
Well, it's really looking at where each person is. And, you know, this is one thing. For years, I did not talk about my own life to people because I lost a daughter to suicide at that same time that my marriage fell apart and bankruptcy all in the same year.
Oh my goodness.
And, but I finally gotten to the point to recognize everybody faces something.
Mm-hmm.
It could be worse than mine. You know, there's diseases, there's other things that quite honestly could be worse, but it does take you down to the point where you say, okay, sometimes the worse it is, you're really rebuilding from scratch. You're saying, okay, what's important to me now? But that's the question that in working with people, because I call it my compass process, but the first step of it is clarity. And how do you get clarity? By asking questions. And often I used to ask myself questions, and my first answer was, I don't know. But when you keep asking and keep looking at what's true for you, the skills that you've had, what you built in your life. You know, you built a family, but I'm sure you had other interests as well. And you began to recognize your own talents and acknowledging them as unique from others, because we're not all the same, especially by midlife. You begin to recognize that, and appreciating those differences, that becomes the first little seed that you can plant in order to really grow a full understanding of your purpose.
Yeah, you know, so do you think that purposes change? Because some people think that you have like an overall purpose for your life, but I felt like my purpose sort of changed, not totally, but it seemed, you know, a lot of my early life was raising my kids, and and I was teaching school. But honestly, as soon as I could find my way to stop teaching school, I did, even though I felt that was my purpose. But it was like, it was never, it was almost like a crutch. You know, it was never something I thought I would do for as many years as I did. But it was a very convenient career to raise children with.
Yeah. And I think we do things for a whole lot of reasons. And especially since we are the mothers in families and very tied to our children, whether we're working or not, starting out with that physical connection to babies, we're tied to them. We're emotionally and physically tied to them. But I think, as you mentioned, purpose, see, for the longest time, I was one of those, I thought maybe that one day the heavens would open up and a voice would come down from heaven and I would know my purpose in life. And it never happened to this date. It's never happened. But I do look back and say there were times that it didn't make any sense why I was called to do something. There was a time that I got into dancing just because some friends were dancing and I couldn't get into the jazz class they were taking because it was full. So I said, okay, well, I'm here. What's available? So I started out with ballet. And I was 30 years old at the time. I was not a young kid starting out with this, but I fell in love with it. And then there was an opportunity to be in musical theater, and it was the community theater, but they had a full orchestra. And I went to this not having any idea what I was doing or how to do an audition. I knew I had to have a song, and I had one completely inappropriate for the show. The show was Fiddler on the Roof, and I came in with one from a chorus line.
Okay.
And generally, you try to sync them up kind of in the same type of thing. Well, I didn't know anything. After that, and I didn't get into the show, because when I stood up to sing, my body froze. I swallowed my voice and no one could hear it. And from then on, I was terrified. You could just say the word audition. It wasn't even happening for 6 months. And I would be terrified. But I kept going, and I had to look back at that and say, what was going on with me? Because no one cared. My husband wasn't encouraging me. My friends didn't really care. They thought it was a little weird. But something in me was so pulled to that I went again and again, terrified, having my children come with me so they could sign me in because I couldn't hold a pen. Well, eventually I got into shows, I got parts, and I began to open up to a different kind of expression from the stage. And what's interesting when you really get into it, it really isn't all about me. It's what is flowing through me. Now, I could look back on that even after I did it for a long time and then stop, but it's like, what was that all about? Why did I fight so hard for that? That's where I began to see sometimes purpose shows up. It may be those inexplicable things that you get fascinated with. It has now then led to speaking, to doing other things with that same feeling of allowing a greater energy and spirit to flow through me. And I recognized that was part of my purpose, and that's how it showed up. Now, you couldn't tell me at the time that being terrified meant I had a purpose.
Right.
But when you stop and look back, you may find something that was really compelling. Even if you were doing it with children, it could have been art, it could have been planting, it could have been writing. You'll find something in there that really is part of your purpose. It takes a little investigation, because maybe you'll be lucky and the heavens will open up for you. But for those who don't have that experience, there's another way.
I think the other thing that's interesting about, so I have a musical theater background also. And I think one of the interesting things about that is when you take the stage, you can be somebody that you don't think you are. And that person may actually be inside of you, but you don't even recognize it.
Yes, that is a beautiful thing about it, because suddenly it's not about you showing up as you. You are showing up as a different character.
Right.
And that is a fun challenge, but it teaches you something also, to really get out of your way and to imagine and then act out how someone else is feeling. Because the very best actors, you don't sense, oh, there's so-and-so acting with just themselves showing up. No, the very best ones, you know, a Meryl Streep, you never know what she's going to be, the take charge or the, you know, the fearful, but she'll be fully into what it is. And so it teaches you and empathy. It teaches you something about other people and noticing and appreciating other people.
And you get to, for that moment in time, you get to put your feet in somebody else's shoes, so to speak, and feel what they feel. And I think that gives you a little more empathy for other people because you've had that experience. And maybe that's why you were led to the theater, so you could work with the ladies. And how about teaching us about money? Because one of the things you talk about is how your thoughts about money change in midlife. So how does that fit into this whole menopause idea?
Well, first, the way it fits in is that by the time you have hit 50, if you start working at 20, okay, that's 30 years. Over those 30 years, I guarantee you, you have handled $1 million. Whether it's been all your earnings or the family money, whatever it has been, that's only an average of $34,000 a year. So you have handled $1 million.
Mhm.
If you live another 30 to 50 years, well, guess what? You need probably more than $1 million. However, the real trick is you don't need it all at the same time, any more than you did in the past. What you need to find is where the flow of money will come from. And one of the reasons it's so important to look at when you're hitting menopause is that if that's age 50, you'll have maybe 20 years to set aside the additional flow of money that you will need for retirement. And I say, even if you want to continue working, because we can stay healthy and continue working, you want to do that because it's your choice, not because you don't have any other option.
Right.
So even if you want to keep working, you better figure out a way to have $1 million flow. And oh yeah, people are always laughing at the fact that, see, when flow stops, you have to worry about a different flow.
So, I saw my parents, they both retired at 62. Now, my dad did that because he had had cancer and so on. But my mom also decided to stop working when she was 62. And there was parts of me that watched them my mom's just turned 90, but my dad died when he was 72. And I saw them, particularly my dad, over those next 10 years. And he got very depressed and he didn't have enough to do. And I think in that time period, there was a lot of encouragement for people to take that Social Security early and to, just kind of not work anymore. And I looked at that and I thought, that's not me, that, because I feel like I'm a lot like my dad as far as being out there wanting to do things. And so, when I turned 62, it was like, I am not stopping working. And, I'd started this business and, it takes a lot of energy and a lot of work to start your own business. And so, what do you see? What do you recommend for women? Because I'm sure everybody's a little different. I mean, I see other people that retire earlier than that and they don't do anything else. So,
Yeah.
how do you see, handling people like that?
Well, one thing I learned in my financial background and insurance industry is always asking people, how long do you need your retirement to last? Now, you see, that's really a more polite way of asking when you think you're going to die. But the interesting thing is everybody has an answer. And it's unpredictable on my part, being on the outside. Because if somebody at 60 says, oh, well, maybe 10 years, I believe that's pretty well self-fulfilling.
Yes, I do too. Mm-hmm.
And other people will say 40 or 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to go inside, because like with your father, if you've got an illness, okay, maybe the smartest thing is, yeah, take your Social Security at 62
Mm-hmm.
and enjoy. what you have left of life. But for many people, you must have it go on longer. And what I really tell people is start out with, what do you want to do during that later portion of your life? It makes a difference where, well, I plan to keep on working till I really can't. And I mean, that's my attitude as well, because I feel like as we get older, we have more to contribute.
Mhm.
And why not keep going? I can't imagine what I was, I'm not going to take up knitting. It's just, it's like, sorry, I can't imagine a life without contribution.
Mhm. I totally agree with you.
But you
And I
have to
think
then,
maybe our generation sees that a little more, maybe
yeah,
because we are living longer and, you know, but then I still see people that retire at 62 and that's it,
yeah.
and
The most important thing is really to go inside and look, because some people like to retire and they have a hobby. My dad painted for a long
Mhm.
time and learned painting, and I still have some of his paintings now that he's gone. But you have to do some of that internal work, because even if you say, okay, I want to retire, well, what are you going to do? If,
Mhm.
if maybe it's 20, 30 years, what are you going to do? If you want to travel around the world, that's great. Make sure that you have the funds to do that and the
Right.
plan how you will make that happen. Maybe you want to live very close to your grandchildren. Well, it makes a difference if they live in the middle of Kansas or in New York City in terms of your
Right.
expenses. Uh, but actually look at it and then sit down, and I have a method to really go through step by step and find out for yourself what you already have. What kind of Social Security is there? How does that work? And for anybody who doesn't know, you get more if you wait until you're
Mhm.
70. And depending upon your age, it may be 72 that you
Oh,
can
really?
continue.
Didn't know
Yeah, it's
that.
going up. Everything's been going up. Full
Yeah.
retirement used to be at 65. And for quite a few people now, it's up to 67. And it'll
Mhm.
continue to go
Yeah,
up.
I'm 66 in 10 months.
Yeah, but the longer that you leave that there and continue to contribute to it, the larger it is. And the difference can be significant.
Right.
The average American now is making about $1,500 a month from Social Security. But the top rate, if you are, waiting till 70, is more like $3,500 a month. Okay, big difference.
Mhm.
Well, if you're 50 and you check this out, that can give you a little bit of guidance of how you want to manipulate that part of your ongoing income, as
Mhm.
well as then finding other ways to add to what you have so that you can live the life that you choose.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Carole, in the time we have left, what kind of services do you offer for people? I mean, it sounds like you do a lot with financial and, you have this book. So what kind of things do you help people and guide them with?
Well, the first thing, and I recommend to really get to know me, but also to have a self-coaching guide through the process, is to read my book. Do you mind if I show you if it's?
Oh, no, I'd love
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, The Menopause Millionaire. And it's the keys to prosperity and meaning, because it's not enough just to get the money together if you haven't really thought through what you want. And also, I even talk a little bit about starting a business in case maybe that's part of what you want to do, and the do's and the don'ts. Do plan it ahead. Don't raid your existing retirement to fund it.
Mhm.
So that's a good place to start. And then I offer life change navigation, which is for leaders. And that is to start by finding your true north, clarity, and then understanding that you want to develop the tools to be resilient. We have a tremendous world of change. And how do you cope with that change? And it's called life change navigation because I sailed for years. And when you get away from the shore, believe me, you have no idea. If the sun's not rising or setting, you have no idea where you are. You need to have a compass to go. And then you never sail directly toward where you're going. That only works if the wind's behind you. You zig and you zag. And that's
That's
pretty
the way
much like
success
life.
is, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's
is never a straight line. I guess leadership isn't either.
no, it isn't. But there are great tools to understanding yourself and understanding people. And then how to move forward when you're not sure what to do. So that's really what's all about. And I work with the leaders and sometimes go into businesses as well to work with all of the employees. And I work best with smaller businesses rather than large corporations.
Okay, so this leadership training, is that for emerging leaders as well as people that are already in leadership? Like, do you differentiate where the person is in that leadership model?
Yes, I always just start with a consultation to make sure that it's a good fit. It has to be a two-way fit where I can see things that would be helpful and that were kind of on the same track. Because I have a smaller number of people, and so it's important that we're the best fit for each other.
Right. You know, it's kind of sad. I'm sure you see this as I do in my business, that sometimes the people that need the most training are the most resistant. And, you know, they think they know it all and they don't need any help. And yet I feel like we all need help in some areas because not one of us can know everything.
No.
You know, there's always training out there and something more that we can learn if we're open to it. So I'm sure that you see that in these leadership. Remember one time I was doing a seminar as corporate training and I was trying to, you know, just go around the room and, you know, get to know the people and what they did and why they were there. And this one guy, he was a chef, and he said his name, he says, and I don't know why I'm here. And I knew why he was there. He was sent there by his boss. He was the most resistant person. He was so negative the entire day. I couldn't wait to see him leave the room. You know, it was just, you know, and he needed it the most because I imagine his job was on the line, you know, so you just never know when you get into those situations.
No, it really, I think all of life, even when I'm coaching people, because, you know, I have expertise in certain areas. I just see some things differently. It doesn't mean I'm a smarter person. It just means I maybe have a different focus. And that, like, together, in fact, sometimes I call myself a thinking partner, because it's about together you have better answers. And when you're working with someone and just willing, just like an actress, to put on their personality and see things from a different perspective, the answers kind of bloom naturally. Yeah. And it's just those little choices, like the zigs and zags of sailing. It's the little choices that make the difference.
Carole, I know you had a free gift for the audience. Could you just tell them what that is in the about 30 seconds we have left?
Okay. Yes. At menopausemillionaire.com/gift. I have several chapters of my book so that you can get an understanding of really kind of what it's all about. So that's in PDF as a download, as well as being able to have schedule a private clarity session, which is 1 hour free of charge. And we can really find out what's going on with you and what your next step is, the clarity.
Okay, well, Carole, I want to thank you so much for being a guest here on our show. And please reach out to Carole. We'll put all the information in the notes so that you can find her on the internet. Thank you, Carole.
Oh, so much fun.